Good evening, our listeners. Hope everything's well. It's that time of week again. It's time to have a little discussion. How are you, Squib?
What up, Yuri?
Nah, not much. Seems like Squib has tongue tied, adversity on his mind,
A little bit.
and um, and how to overcome it through life from youth to adulthood. We were talking about this before we started recording the podcast, and actually, you're a really good person to talk to. I'd like to see what your introspective is on it. You know,
For adversity, I mean, I think we all kind of go through adversity when we're growing up. We don't really realize the type of adversity that we're going through because when you're young, you don't really think of it in the same way that you think of it nowadays. And as we get older, especially with the more and more responsibility and kind of how life evolves into where we're at now, being about probably hopefully maybe halfway through it. I don't really want to say three quarters at this present moment in time.
it might be 7/8 for me, but I'm a little different.
Yeah, hopefully not. Hopefully we're here for a while.
You
But
know,
we're definitely a lot different. I think the adversities we face nowadays are a lot different than
and
what we would face when we were younger.
I also want to put out there that Squib and I are talking about this. We're not experts. We don't have PhDs in psychology and relationships.
We just observe.
Yeah, I. We're coming from. I'd like to think that we're coming more from an angle of the common man, like what the everyday person, how they deal with adversity, and the bad ways, the good ways, the in between ways. I mean, adversity it makes up a big part of life, man.
It does, and I mean, you had adversity when you were growing up. I mean, you had your father wasn't very nice, as you discussed last week with the ghost story,
Nasty little man.
and I had a little bit of trauma that I grew up in a.
A little bit.
I grew up in from a alcoholic household to
A little bit, Matt.
yeah, there was just a little bit. I guess is a lot in some people's eyes. I'm a survivor of suicide, alcohol addiction, alcohol and drug addiction. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I have my own. Let's see, my own bouts with depression and anxiety myself nowadays.
You're a regular person.
Yeah,
I
pretty
I mean,
much.
it's sad to say, but you're basically a regular person.
Yeah.
For me, I had there was child abuse.
Yep.
Um, when I was younger, there was I was molested, so there was pedophilia.
Yep.
Then there was alcohol. Never got into the drugs because, as we all know, anyone who knows me, don't ever give me marijuana because I just become paranoid. And from that point on, I realized drugs are not for me. But boy, I could drink with the best of them.
Yep.
I mean, I was in detox rehab when I was 20 years old. Now, a lot of the adversity in my younger years partly was not my fault. The other part, I brought upon myself trying to deal with the adversity that wasn't my fault, if that makes sense.
Yeah, kind of running. I think a lot
And
of
then-
people do that. They kind of run from themselves and from
Yeah.
the situation because to look at the situation is pretty hard in general, and you don't really realize how much it's affecting your psyche, persona, physicality. Even I mean, it really affects your whole being as a person.
All in how you deal with it too. And I don't think we're taught how to deal with it correctly most of the time. I mean, I was left to figure it out for myself.
Yep.
I mean, in my 20s, got married young, had kids young, da da da. And I'll be honest with you, it wasn't until my divorce, 14 years after being married, went to counseling. And after the marriage counseling, I stuck with the counselor. And it was the first time in my life I really dealt with how how I deal with adversity, and it was eye opening. So let's start with you, man. What was the first real, thing you had to deal with as a kid?
As a kid, was it? All right, let's see. I'd probably say the first time that I really realized handling stress, anxiety, and that was probably fourth grade. I was always a good student.
Really?
So, yeah, I used to get these crazy migraines. And so I used to hit my head on like the wall or on the floor to like relieve the pressure from like my from the anxiety that my head would create.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Did not your parents or teacher or some adult see you doing that?
Yeah, my mom saw it. I told her exactly kind of what it was. I was like, it was like a pain that once it happened, it kind of relieved. I mean, I didn't really like bang my head profusely,
No, I
nonstop,
get it.
but like, yeah, it was.
Wow.
Yeah, it was. It was definitely one of the times where like I never realized how much anxiety I have and how overruling it is. Probably that was the beginning of what would snowball into drug addiction and alcoholism. I would probably say, because that was a part of not being able to handle what I would be able to normally handle in
So
life.
it's not necessarily the adversity that it's the anxiety that it brings that you have a hard time with.
I
I'm
would
trying to.
Yeah, that's what I would probably say that. I mean, it's I have ADHD and ADHD, a little bit dyslexia. I'm not very good at reading. There's a couple different things. I might be on the spectrum. I would not be surprised. But the way that my brain handles and internalizes everything, and it doesn't really let things go out, I would probably say. So what happens is I internalize all of the anger, angst, animosity, anything that I'm feeling at that moment, I kind of internalize. And that's why being an artist was always great, because as being an artist, I would be able to put it onto paper. I would funnel all of that anxiety and angst really into whatever I was creating at that time. Where I would probably say nowadays, I'm much better at controlling it. I can meditate. I actually took a mindfulness retreat, and I actually I did meditation for a couple of years. That slowed and quieted my mind. But when I was growing up, my mind would just race like, I think it just ran from one thing to the other, to the next, and it never really, it couldn't slow down.
Can you see the stages of those years through your art?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, there's definitely times where when I was in the throes of addiction, when I was still an artist, that my work was much darker than the earlier years, which the earlier years were more psychedelic because I was a hippie, so really I was trying to do things outside of the box just to begin with, but I would probably say that it increased as I went down the scale of self-abuse. I would probably say that the artwork went down the same plateau. I would probably say that you could definitely see it.
And now, in your adult years, you found ways to quiet your mind and kind of control what is basically racing thoughts constantly, I assume.
Yeah.
Because of that, do you find it harder to create art than you did before, or is it just a different type of art?
Ooh, that's a catch-22. So,
Can I just say this? Because you see it a lot with like musicians. You can see a difference in the music that they produce from if they're lucky enough to survive their drug and partying years to their sober years. There is a difference.
Yes, you're right. And so for mine, let's see. So just to give a little background, I'm a member. I go to the secret society of Alcoholics Anonymous.
It's so secret.
I'm quite all right admitting
Pretty
that
sure
because-
70% of our population belongs in there. But anyways, go ahead.
Exactly. And it also so before I really got into a recovery type situation, I didn't really know how to handle anything in life. That program and the teachings of that program actually, I will truly say, changed, molded, and made me the man that I am today.
Okay, so let me ask before you go on. I don't mean to cut you off. So before the program, and people, we're not preaching people need to, this is not for the program. This is just Squib's life and what we're
Yeah, this is just my life.
I just want to put that out there. Before the program, and you were introduced to these different ideas, and the 12 steps and higher power and all that. When adversity came your way, you almost didn't deal with it.
No.
Your way of dealing with it was what? Using
Drink, drug, and
anger.
really get what I wanted out of it. Because
Would you be angry when you were fucked up, or what was that like for you? I mean, what kind of did it provide an escape where you're not even thinking of adversity, or when you were fucked up? And I like talking about this because no one ever talks about what they're thinking when they're fucked up.
No.
And I think it's important because it gives you an insight into why people start using. Or were you one of those people when you were fucked up looking at adversity and you had all these great ideas how to deal with it, but that's all as far as it went, just an idea of how you never actually execute? Because I find that addicts, including myself, when you're using, you have all these great ideas. You have all these problems. Oh, I'm going to solve this tomorrow. Once you're under the influence, the problem is you never execute. The ideas of how to deal with life just play over and over again. You think you're doing something, you're not, because you never actually. I would go as far to say is that using, whether it's alcohol or drugs, prevent a person from executing in life more than anything.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I mean, for me, I'm kind of a functioning addict. I hate to admit that. So I don't really shut the engine down ever. It just habitually goes.
You're the most dangerous type of addict.
I'm kind of like, I mean, I hate to admit this, but like, I'm kind of one of those sociopath serial killer types. I mean, I really hate to say that, but it's just, it really never, the brain never shuts down. It's just one of those that like, I can't, and then I liked fueling whatever I would do to fuel it, whether it was drugs, alcohol, whatever it was, just because I could keep going at an ungodly rate.
Yeah, but my question is, and you kept going at an ungodly rate, running from the actual adversity in your life? What were you running from? Like, were you actually feeling good? I mean, something had to do it for you in a way where you were completely able to somewhat ignore what was really going on in life.
So this,
because that's the whole goal. Do you understand?
Exactly. So this is pretty funny. So the amount of denial that was inside of me was so heavy that. So just to give people a background of my life, my brother killed himself when I was 18 years old. I think I've mentioned that once before on here, but it's kind of a pivotal point of my existence.
Part of who you are.
Yeah, totally. And so after that, really, literally, like, I never stopped doing anything. Like, literally, the next month after he did that, I'm going to admit something that probably I shouldn't, but I will, I ate acid pretty much, like, the month after, which was probably not the best idea. But what I kind of did, which I kind of said this to my therapist, and I do have a therapist, and I've seen her for 15 years now, and therapy has helped dramatically also, is that I kind of compartmentalized the situation into the situation, and then I just never looked at it. So I kind of just
you got partway there, and then it got too scary.
And then I just didn't want to actually, like, I went to school the next day after
the event. I'll never forget that.
After the event happened, I walked into school the next day.
With a smile on your face.
Well.
No, but not, I don't want people to think he was happy. But I'll tell you, if anyone could, that was an act, I mean, that was Oscar, like, award. Like, that was unbelievable what you did, man.
Somebody asked me about that, and when you're that age, I mean, I really didn't know what else to do. And I
think you need to be around your friends too, man.
I said this to my therapist too, is that the situation was so traumatic and so heavy. Heavy is really not the word that I should be using. It was just so surreal that I think really, if I didn't just compartmentalize it and act like nothing happened and just kept going, if I actually analyzed what happened to me and what the experience was, it probably would have broke my brain, to be quite honest.
I agree.
I at that age, I don't think the trauma of going through, 1 minute it was one way and the next it was not, I think my brain would have just popped.
I also think what the listeners have to understand is that day, it's not like your mom called you and said, hey, your brother
Oh no,
It's much more traumatic. You actually, and we don't obviously have to get into details, but you found him.
I found him.
Okay, so to me, the reason I bring that up is because I think the visual part of it and seeing the completion of what the finality of what had happened, I think maybe that was the part where, how, as you said before, you would like compartmentalize all this stuff and get to a certain point, and I think that was the point where, and I wouldn't want to face that either, especially as a young person.
Yep.
I mean, that's like it doesn't
Pretty
get much
horrific.
worse than that. I mean, maybe the horrors of war. If you saw those first person when you're 18, that's the only thing that can probably match to it. So totally understandable. Totally, like you would get to that point, and then it's like, no, that's enough. I'm going to run now. I get that. I
Yep.
totally get it.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty much what I kind of did. So
I also think that's why God spared you in the end because He understood too.
I agree. I do agree with that too because he definitely helped me to get my life back together, and so what happened was as I kept running and doing whatever I was doing from say age 18 to 26 because I found recovery right around 26 before I relapsed. Uh, I would probably say that I really didn't take into account anything. I mean, I really, literally, I lived fast and really thought I was just going to die young and didn't really value life, myself, my interactions. Really, I took everything for granted, to be quite honest. I think that's how a
And
lot
the
of life is
substance
now.
and the substances helped.
Just dull it and
You know,
make you not think about what you're doing. Because some of the things you're doing are pretty like. I mean, I'll
Okay.
never forget. This is a funny story. So I'm going to see a concert in New York City. My whole thing was always so I could be famous, so I could get more money, so I could do more drugs. Now, the reality was, when I look back on it, is I couldn't do any more drugs than I was doing. I was really, literally on the verge of dying to begin with. So really, the whole thought process about what I was really
was a
like
delusion.
was delusional. And then when I found recovery, I'll never forget this. And I really do say this. I say this to my therapist quite often, who she's well aware how important she is in my existence. So she goes like this to me. She goes, Matt, and this was probably, I'm going to say maybe a year after I got clean. And so to go backwards a little bit, at 26, I cleaned up from alcohol and cocaine. And then from 26 to 30, I relapsed on pills because I thought it was a different drug and that it was the drugs that were the problem. I didn't really realize that it was me that was the problem. So at 30, I'm going to say maybe 31, about maybe a year into recovery, maybe a half or three quarters, the therapist ends up asking me this simple question. She goes, so, Matt, I have to ask you. And she probably felt a little more comfortable because she wasn't going to come out of the get go with this question. She goes, have you ever thought about killing yourself? And I stopped. I looked at her. I go, no. Why would I ever kill myself? I go, after what I went through and like the fact that it almost destroyed me as a person.
Because that's exactly what you're doing now.
And she looks at me and she goes, Matt, she
knew
goes,
it.
most people, the way you party and the way you drink, she goes, and drugs, she goes, you're not out to have a good time. She goes, you're out to destroy yourself.
To die.
And she goes, you're killing yourself.
Yeah.
And I literally will never forget that till, I mean, I'm going to remember that probably on my dying day.
That's
Is
insane.
that literally I stopped,
That's your come to Jesus moment.
the
as I
light
said.
bulb hit my head, and I literally was like, holy snap. I was like, she really literally like summed it up in a nutshell. And that is that was the early portion into like my early years, and then never really, I just never really identified. I don't know if it was just because I was doing so many drugs and mixed and matched, lost track of who I was. I do believe that like some form of addiction to a certain degree is you lose your soul and you lose who you are as a persona, which there was definitely some of that.
Yeah, but not completely, because I think I agree with you on that. But there's a point of no return where people actually completely lose themselves and who they are, and that's usually the end.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
I think you got a taste of it.
I was heading down that road, and if I didn't clean up at 26, I knew I was going to die by 27 because I didn't sleep for, I think it was 2 years. I think I slept for 2 hours for 2 years.
Crazy.
And I just fueled myself on, I drank a Magnum to 2 Magnum bottles of red wine a night, along with lots of, well, it was kind of like a speedball because I was always, I always like to bring myself up, and wine makes you go down. So it was really, I hate to say it like that, but that's kind of what it was.
You used what you had, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's basically your youth into your 20s. You found sobriety, thank God.
Yep.
Now, in your adulthood, guess what? The same adversity's there.
Yep.
Whether it's an old adversity, or now, these days, and this is not an easy world to live in. So,
No.
I think life comes at us at all different angles. This is all of us. None of us, you know, the old saying, cliche, oh, none of us are alone. We really are alone. I think we all have the same struggles. And it's hard, especially when you're an adult and you're caring for an elderly parent like you, or you have kids like I do, to make that time to deal with your own stuff. It's almost like you have to find a way to deal with it in the most efficient manner possible, because as an adult, you have other responsibilities. You can't just stop life and say, oh, I'm going to work on myself. No, I know that sounds great and everything, but that's not how it works.
No.
So I guess my question is day in and day out, because I know how I do it. I'm interested, how do you do it? How do you deal with the day in and day out crap of life? And then every once in a while, when life really throws you, one out of left field, to really mix it up good. How do you deal with that as the adult that you are now? And obviously you don't use, so that's off the table. What do you do now? How do you ground yourself in order? Do you hide from it anymore? Do you still compartmentalize, get to a certain point, leave it alone, or do you run at it full force? Or do you kind of like walk towards it slowly and make a plan as you go? Do you get what I'm saying? I'm really interested in how you approach these things in life. Because I know how I do, and it's definitely not what other people do. So
I can compartmentalize certain aspects of it depending on how crazy it's going nowadays. But really, more importantly than anything, and this goes back to like recovery, doing the 12 steps, is step 3 is the most important, and I don't really want to go too crazy into this because that could be its own episode, and there's some people that believe in it or not, but that a higher power, whatever the higher power is, they pretty much tell you to find a higher power. And for some reason, somewhere along the way, and I've been in recovery for a long period of time, and I've seen many people come, many people go, but for some reason, God spared me. And in that moment, and he also took away my obsession for drugs and alcohol, which is coming from somebody who did drugs and alcohol 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's pretty mind-boggling in my eyes. So nowadays, my new motto is pretty much God's got the game plan and I just have to do the work. And whatever it is, no matter what it is, I try to walk through it, because I can't go full bore at anything at this present moment in time. It gets too much. It gets too much at once, and besides being too much at once, I can't handle the anxiety in certain aspects. So I compartmentalize, piecemeal things, and then what I can do is kind of handle one part at a certain time, do another part at another time. And you've seen me in certain aspects when I can't. When my anger goes really crazy, I usually have to just disengage, take a breath, walk away from it, and then I can come back to it. And
it almost sounds like you take on basically the old saying, inch by inch, anything's a cinch. So you take these larger problems and you break them down to smaller parts, and each part you conquer one at a time. You have patience. You have the patience with what's going on.
Exactly.
Which is which is a trait that many people lack, and is a trait that I wish I had more of. You
It's
know,
yeah, and I would say that you're right because it's hard because your brain wants to do one thing, but you have to train it not to, which is where meditation came into play. Because meditation actually disengaged my process to my action. It gave me a pause in between those two. I would say that those two, there's not just an action and a reaction. There's an action, I analyze, and then there's a reaction now, which I never had before. So that's what I would probably say is a big difference nowadays than it was before. Now, do you do the same thing?
as far as in adulthood,
Yeah. I mean, we'll go back for you.
that's a really good question. I don't think I've ever had someone like
Really thought about
straight
it?
up ask me, how do you, Yuri, how do you deal with adversity? Um,
Let's go back. Let's kind of we'll throw that to you, and then we'll both come back at the end.
yeah, I can tell you what I tell my children.
Now it's not do as I say,
No,
not as I
it's
do
not
type
that.
of situation.
No, and I think I'm saying that because the fact that I say it to them and believe in it so much, it's probably what I do. I'm just not seeing it that way because I don't step back and look at myself like some people. I'm not one to step back and look at myself.
Gotcha.
I probably should.
I do. Yeah.
I don't know if I'm capable. I'm a bit of a scaredy cat when it comes to what I might see. I know that for a fact
Oh, okay.
about myself. I always tell my children, no matter what life brings to you, how bad it can be, because it can be really bad sometimes.
Yep.
I mean, situations can come that just strike the furthest reaches of your heart with sadness and or anger or jealousy, envy, any of these horrible emotions. So I always tell my children, don't think about what's in front of you too much because your brain has a way of making it seem a lot worse than it is. Do not hide from it, which is the easy way thing to do, which we were talking about compartmentalizing. To me, that's kind of like a childish way to deal with things. I understand that adults do it, and I understand why. I'm not blaming you. I'm not calling them a child. We all have things we have to work on. But when you're really healthy, I really believe that you run towards the problem with no fear, and you solve it, and you go on to the next. And I'm not saying you live your life thinking all it is problems. But when there is one, don't run from it.
No.
Run straight to it. Even if you're the one who caused the problem, which are the hardest ones to run to, you have to learn to admit when you're wrong, and then say to yourself, how do I fix this? And then put the work in, And I think there's forgiveness of self that runs in there.
Yep. Yeah. I can see that. Yeah.
I think these are important, traits to have in order to survive this world. Now, I didn't always have that. I used to deal with adversity and things that bothered me with anger because I'm a big guy, and I learned from early on. I watched my father gain control through violence.
Yeah,
because of violence.
Because you like to fight.
Yeah, and anger. So I thought to myself, oh, you get whatever you want. If you're good at violence, you can get whatever you want, which is true. I never understood it's okay to be good at violence and be like a quote unquote violent man. But if you're that, what you need to do is be able to cage that. Okay? Because when you're able to cage that, you have the capacity to do that, but you only bring it about in the worst circumstances.
Yep.
Like someone's life's being threatened or something like that. You actually become a man of honor. When you don't cage it, which is the way I lived for a long time, you become an animal. And my wake-up call was, and of course, this was fueled by drinking and stuff, and the anger got when I was younger. The wake up call one day was when I was in my early 20s. I realized the only reason people liked me because they were afraid to show me that maybe they didn't like me. It was like a fear, and I'm like, and I realized I'm like, oh my god, I'm going to end up alone because as people become adults, they're just not going to bother with you if you're violent or angry.
That's very true.
You know, what? Why? Why should they?
Well, at 40 years old, if you're going to beat somebody up, it's a
Yeah.
little weird.
So I realized then, like, okay, I have to change my ways. It doesn't mean that I become a little wimp or a pussy or whatever. I mean, I still know how to commit violence, and unfortunately, I'm pretty good at it. But I've also learned to cage it. It's not something that I brag about. It's there, but it's there in the protective nature for the people I love and the things I believe in. And that's it. And I hope that I never have to show it because that would be a good life. If I never have to show that ugly part of me again, it would be a good life. And also learning to cage that anger and face adversity head on was the way I defeated my father in my head.
Oh,
Because that's exactly what he never did.
yeah.
I did what he couldn't do. Yes, he taught me anger, he taught me hatred, he taught me violence. But I overcame that and then turned it on him, and I ended up winning in the end. Because when I was a kid, he would beat me. There was no beating him.
Yeah.
So this was my way of winning. It's one of the ways I was able to forgive him and move on with life.
Oh,
Because
nice.
I felt like I had to fight a win.
That's pretty cool, actually.
You know,
Yeah, I never really thought of that, but yeah, I could see that.
but adversity, and it comes in all different forms. It's very hard. I will admit, it's hard when problems come up and that involve my children and stuff. It's very hard for me. It's hard for me to control my emotions with it.
Yeah.
A lot of times I have to like think about it for a few hours and calm down.
Yeah.
Because when it comes to my kids, the first thing I want to do is go hurt the thing that's causing them problems.
Totally.
But the funny thing is, it's like 90% of the time, it's them who's causing themselves the problems. And you can't go hurting them. So I have to always take some time and calm down. And then once I calm down, I guess it's a form of meditation.
Definitely.
Once I calm down, a lot of times going to church house me a lot grounds me.
Yep.
I'm able to deal with these, with, calmly and the right way. But I'm no different than there's a lot of guys out there like me. I mean, the guy's instinct first is, just the way we're wired, and mostly because of testosterone and stuff, is to deal with a threat with violence. I mean, that's what men are built for war,
Yeah.
But at the same time, obviously we can't run around, solving everything with violence. We have to, as men, you have to learn to cage it, and it'll be okay. Don't people? Oh, you should be more soft. You should be more. No. As a man, there has to be a part of you that's scary. The key is to cage it and never show it to him, but you know that it's there. And when you know that it's there and it's well controlled, other people pick up on it.
Oh, I'd probably say that. Yeah, because I mean, people can feel the energy of.
Yeah, and it's not negative energy. It's like, oh, he's able to control that part of him. This guy, he has some honor. And you know how I am about honor. I think there's too many men without honor these days.
Yeah. Well.
And our society's suffering for it.
Well, admitting you're wrong.
And I think
too.
a lot of women are desperate to find men with honor. It affects everything. A lot of our problems in our society is us men's fault. I will admit it. We've really slacked. And yeah. So I think. I guess my answer is I learned to deal with adversity in my adult years through my children.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want my children being like me, man. I didn't want them being angry and violent. And I don't want them. I want my sons to know how to fight, which they do, but I also taught them how to cage it. And this is an appropriate time, and to have compassion because I had no compassion growing up.
Yeah.
Because my thought was, why should I have compassion on people? Look what I went through as a child, being beat up and molested. But I learned that compassion is key to self-healing.
Now, did you learn compassion from a certain situation, or was it just in general? Because I remember, like, when I learned compassion.
I learned compassion from something. And
It was a
it
situation.
might shock you. It was a situation, but...
So what was yours?
1998, I'm standing in church, and it's Good Friday, and they're reading the gospel. And I had just been, I was locked up in a psych hospital, and because I basically had a nervous breakdown in my teens, and I was standing there just kind of half listening and not listening, and it comes up on the part where Christ is hanging on the cross, and the thief on the right, the thief on the left was mocking Christ, like, if you're the Son of God, take yourself down, take us down. And the thief on the right told the thief on the left, shut your mouth. We deserve to be here, what we've done. This man's done nothing. He's innocent. And he turned to Christ and he said, he didn't even ask to be let into heaven. All he asked Christ, just please remember me. Just remember me. You don't even have to forgive me. Just remember me. That's all I ask. And that's when Christ turned and said, well, today you'll be in heaven with me. He was the first human being to be let into heaven. That was Christ's compassion. I was like, God, if Christ is hanging there dying from crucifixion, which is so painful, and he still has the heart to turn to see this thief and see his heart and have compassion on him, who am I? I need to have compassion. Now, when I say I have compassion, I do. But I don't use it as an excuse for people's behaviors. You could be a horrible person. I'll have compassion on you for your soul, that your soul is that evil. But it doesn't mean I'm going to enable you. I'll still kill you. It doesn't mean I'm going to enable your horrible action. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah. You understand the repercussion.
I try to look at every person as having a soul.
Yeah, I could see that. Because we do.
And I try to have compassion on that part. I'm not excusing people's actions at all, and that's how I live, And I try not to judge because judging is, I feel, is dangerous. I feel like if you judge enough, your judgment upon others will become your own.
Well, it also kind of turns into justifying all of your actions.
Your own behaviors,
which if you're not taking inventories, like I take an inventory almost every night just to double check myself.
Which feeds the adversity you might be at. So you might start blaming other people for your adversity and stuff. It's just another way of ignoring it.
Yeah.
It's the same thing as you compartmentalizing it, getting to a certain point, then going using. It's just a different method.
Totally.
Judging, blaming other people. No. Sometimes you have to look at yourself, realize it's your fault. Sometimes you look at it and you had no fault in it alone, and fault in it at all. But for some reason, it was sent to you. And because just the fact that it was sent to you, it's your job to deal with it in the correct way.
There's a good quote in AA that when you have one finger pointing out, there's four pointing back.
Yeah. The other good quote I heard one time was, if you really want to know what your faults are, find your worst enemy and ask them, because they have no reason to lie to you.
There's a lot of truth to that too. And one of the big things I've always viewed is the compassion situation is just, you have to have it. It's just, it's one of the things that, how can I say? It's lacking in this world right now. And I do remember the time when I actually, I was young. I was a lot younger than that actually, when I learned compassion. I think it was 6 years old, 7 years old.
Wow, that's young.
I lived near a lake. And so there was this duck. This is a horrible story. So there was a duck, and it was a mother duck, and there was a nest that was in the mud.
Oh, please don't tell me you did something.
And it was kind of far away. So me being not thinking and having anxiety and kind of just doing my normal thing, I was trying to hit it with a rock. And literally I kept
throwing... The duck or the nest?
The duck. But the duck was protecting the nest. So the duck was literally sitting on the nest. And so I'm sitting there and I'm throwing rocks at it. I missed 3 times and I'll never forget. I hit it. And I hit it pretty good and all of a sudden it goes, wah!
Oh, God.
And literally, I went from, I'm trying to hit this thing to, oh my God, I hit it, to what did you just do?
I'm going to go to hell.
And that thought process absolutely went through my mind. I'm not going to lie about that at all. And I said, what did you really just do? And that was
You actually analyze it at that age, like
Oh
that.
yeah, then I said I will never do this. I will never do that again. I actually had to ask for forgiveness. I was like,
That
"Sorry, God. I go. I'm supposed to treat everything like how I want to be treated." I go.
boy,
I go. I didn't mean to hit it. I go, and then I kind of was like, "Well, you were throwing a rock trying to hit it. It's like you just hit it."
he taught you a lesson that day.
Oh yeah, there was. It was absolutely, and that lesson. I gotta say, I still have that lesson to this day. Like, I think that's where most of my, because you've actually mentioned that to me before. Like, how can you live with so much compassion? And like, I sometimes am ignorant to how people truly are because I give them the benefit of the doubt so much.
See, I'm the opposite.
And you are. That's one of the things that we're very opposite about. But
But I will. I always say that I wish I had your level of compassion. That I look up to you for that.
yeah.
I really do.
Oh yeah. No, you've mentioned that many times, and it's just it's ingrained. But my parents always taught me to. My parents really were great parents, and they taught me really. They had their own problems and stuff, but they really did truly love me as much as they possibly could. I mean, I wasn't the easiest kid to. I wasn't the easiest kid to be around, but at the same time, they really always taught me to treat others how I wanted to be treated. Never. I mean, really, they taught me to live by the Ten Commandments. To be quite honest,
Which
it's
is a great way to live.
it's still how I live.
It's very hard to
just-
live by the Ten Commandments.
Yeah, I don't lie. I don't cheat. I don't steal. I don't. I mean, even when I was a drug addict, I never stole. I mean, I did a lot of shady shit, but I never stole from anyone. I mean, it just was never. That was. Yeah, I couldn't. That was ingrained. I'd rather sell drugs than steal, and I can't justify that was a great situation either. But still, at the same time, it's just I always treated everybody how I wanted. I always treat everyone how I want to be treated.
Now, as you've gotten older, are your methods changing on how you deal with life's crosses and problems?
Uh, I would say
Or is it basically evened out and you found what works for you?
it's kind of evened out. The faith portion is usually I ask why I'm going through something because my view nowadays compared to before, because I think a lot of life is why. When you're younger, it's why is it happening to me? I think a lot of
Why
society
me?
is that.
Why
Why me?
Oh, yeah.
Like
Oh, my God.
everybody loves the why me.
Yeah.
Well, the reality is
Me. Well, it's not about me.
and sometimes you have to learn like some of the shittiest things in the world that I've gone through have been my greatest teachers. I mean, like the suicide, literally, like horrible situation. I mean, almost killed me, but still at the same time, it taught me to appreciate life to such a degree that, I mean, I value every interaction that I have now that I never did before.
There is no growth without struggle. That's for sure.
I would absolutely agree with that. And I also view now that my higher power, God, whatever you want to call him, I try to keep this more generalized for everybody. I would say that it teaches me every lesson. Like last year, my father had acute kidney failure, which one day he was okay, and within a week we were going through the hospital regimen and trying to keep him alive and a whole slew of things. And I think during that situation was one of the first times where like it was one of the trials of being a hardcore adult where it just came at you one minute it was different than the next. And I just had to take one piece at a time, and then it was, well, we have to get through this section, then to this section. Like first it was surgeries, then it was recovery, then it was rehab. So each little
Yeah, you broke it down to your small
steps.
little, yeah.
Yeah. There were like little steps that you can go up and kind of accomplish what you want to do. So it's it's a lot different now than I don't think really. I don't think most people can handle trying to do everything all at once because I think your brain would not be able to decipher and how to. That's why most people just drink their lives away. Or,
Well, not properly, at least.
yeah, exactly. There would.
And it's a task in and of itself to come up with solutions for issues in your life, and to come up with them without involving emotions. That's another great lesson I learned because I feel like when we're younger, we let emotion get out of control. Oh, making a decision on how to deal with something, adversity, or whatever kind of decision. It could be financial, you know, personal, whatever it is. The worst thing in my eyes you can do is get emotion involved. You have to train yourself to it's easy as we get older too to become more stoic. I think those were when good decisions are made, because when I look back at all the millions of bad decisions I've made in my life, there hasn't been one where there wasn't some high level emotion involved. All the good decisions I've ever made, I was very stoic and made the decision. And I mean, that's enough proof for me to try to keep them. I'm not saying emotions are, bad. I'm just saying they have their place in decision making, especially for life. As far as dealing with problems that life throws you, it's not a place for them to be. I think you make mistakes.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Well, because the emotions create the anxiety creates angst, and then
And paranoia.
you don't think straight when that's all going on. That's what I would probably say.
Well, it's a never ending cycle,
Yeah,
and I think that's probably when. It's probably a lot of times when people start using too.
I was going to say,
'Cause that cycle's horrible.
or they drown out whatever they're doing because they don't want to deal with it, and so they use the escape. Whatever your escape is, sex, drugs. I mean, it could be anything. I mean,
I've actually met people who can compartmentalize so much that they almost forget it was part of their life. They actually never deal with it. They're able to put it in part of their brain and just keep moving on. It's crazy.
that's pretty crazy.
It's like no emotion,
That's
no real. It's very. Yeah, I was very close with someone who was like that.
that's a
Still close with them, just in a different way, and that was, and the person fully admits it.
Are they straight up socio? That's kind of like sociopathic tendency.
No, because the person has a very high level of compassion and forgiveness.
Oh, okay.
It's a
Oh,
very strange mix.
yeah. That's a
What I'm saying is that compartmentalization comes when it comes to themselves.
gotcha. Okay,
But
gotcha.
they're very good human beings as far as compassion and loving thy neighbor and being helpful.
Yeah,
But they just have this part of them, which I think is kind of amazing.
that's actually pretty bad. I mean, that's pretty badass, actually. I mean, I wish I could kind of do that.
Yeah, it's not good for a relationship though.
No, well, I mean,
It's good for other things, but not for a relationship.
no. Well, you're really not sharing at that point because
Well-
you can compartmentalize anything.
I'm not very good at relationships either, so I can't say a word.
Actually, that's one of my worst things that I've done.
I'm not good at the pillow talk stuff. I'm a guy who likes to go to work, come home, eat, sleep,
Yep.
have sex once in a while, and my life is fulfilled.
Yeah.
You know?
I'm a simple
And
guy
I know
myself.
that, and that's why I have a hard time wanting to date again because I don't want to put a girl through that. That's not fair to them. It's almost like I feel like if I were to date again, I would tell them like, I'm not capable of giving you that. It's just not me. It's not because I don't care. Like I realize when you're like upset or whatever, I'm not gonna be able to like show it in the way you want me to. I'm just not like that.
Yeah, I'm horrible like that. I can't.
I wonder if that has to do with our childhood too.
I definitely think so. I would.
Vulnerability. That's what it is.
Yeah, totally. You
Because
can't.
to this day, I feel like vulnerability is a weakness.
Yeah, totally. I'm right. I'm right there with you.
I think that's a whole nother episode. We
that's
talk about.
definitely that's definitely another episode. So
But that was an interesting talk tonight.
yeah. So I'm
I
gonna.
got to learn some things about you that I never knew.
Yeah, no, I don't really talk about that stuff because the facing adversity. I think what you were saying before too. I think it's very true. I think we handle it different at different times in our evolutionary process of being a human. But I also think that we're really not taught how to handle it when we're younger, which
Because the answer's scary. You know
we
why?
should.
The answer's scary. That's why.
Yeah,
Because the answer is the way to deal with it is always the hard way.
is to face it.
Yeah, and that's the scary hard way.
Yeah.
And
And
human
soc-
beings do everything to avoid discomfort.
Yeah, and I was just about to say, and society doesn't really want to teach you responsibility. It wants to teach you to do.
Obedience.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I'm seeing. So
Yeah, that's a whole other episode.
that's definitely a lot. So on that
shit,
note,
dude. What are you doing to us? We could talk for another 9 hours.
yeah.
So, all right, well, on that note, my friend, it was good talking to you again this week.
Good talking this week too, Yuri.
I hope you have a successful week.
You too. Hopefully, we'll touch base next week about who knows. We'll figure it out at that time.
We always figure it out on the fly. Whatever feels right, people. You know.
That's right.
And all of you, thank you for listening, putting up with our nonsense, listening to our crazy thinking. Hope that you guys found something in common with us. We try to keep it simple
And relatable.
and relatable.
I mean, we
And just you're all doing okay. You're not me. You're doing good.
and hopefully, if you're not, this will help you in those times because
Yeah, if you're not, seriously, reach out and find help. There's plenty of it out there. And I know that sounds so cliche, and I always thought it was until I actually reached out and found help. Just
Yep. And as
you're
somebody
worth it.
and as somebody who survived suicide, that is a permanent solution to a temporary problem.
Yes,
So-
and it leaves a lot of sadness and hurt behind that. The person who, if they could have seen what it left behind, I'm pretty sure would have never done it. Whoever goes through with it.
Exactly.
And also, one more thing, guys. Honestly, if you're an addict and you're our age, get your shit together. Go to the program. Find something to help. Because you're worth it. You still have a lot of life to live. There's a lot of us out there who did it. You have a lot more in common. We understand more than you think. You have to reach out, though. You have to be the one to ask for help.
Yep.
So for the first time in your damn life, do something for yourself and ask for help.
And it's worth it.
Yeah, and we're going to love you no matter what. So ask for help, please.
And sometimes the worst situation that you go through can become the greatest situation that you go
It
through.
could be the turning point in your life that you will thank God for the rest of your life actually happened to you.
It's all a process of growth.
All right, people, have a good night. No more talking. We love you, and we'll see you next week. Take care.
Later.